on. Hey, welcome back to Change the Odds, the podcast where marriage and family were never meant to be a game of chance. Blaine, Adrienne, Dr. Barbara Wilson is back. We kind of got a little mini-series going on here.
I'm loving
in the midst of, we're on a lengthy series, Becoming Friends, Partners, and Lovers, and we've come to the end of that. And now we're talking about intimacy, what it means to be lovers, built on vulnerability. 2 episodes ago, we talked about intimacy outside the bedroom. Last episode, we heard Dr. Wilson's talk on how to have meaningful sex. But we normally don't show this part of, whenever we do classes here at Bayside, we almost always end those classes with 15, 20, 30 minutes of Q&A. Always a fun time kind of in the room. But we normally don't air that on the podcast. But last night's Q&A I thought was so important. We got so many questions that were filtered in. I thought it would be very useful for people. Think about some of the questions we got last night. We did talk about, to some extent, does a person have a right to say no to their spouse? So even kind of got into this idea of honoring agency, things like that. We had questions from every generation of how do you have meaningful sex whenever your kids are little and the chaos that's there. What does it look like as you get older, specifically if function becomes a struggle for men and desire for women? We were just kind of all over the board. What do you remember your favorite question last night, or the question that you thought, man, that you loved your answer, or there's a lot of people that need to hear this?
The one that I, thought about was, you were pushing me on other ways, especially we talked about orgasms, and you kind of pushed me on, okay, what else are you talking about, Barb?
Oh, yeah. The stat I've read before, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that 60% of women cannot orgasm by penetration alone, that it does take some other means.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned other means, and I was like, all right, Barb, let's be honest with people. What does that mean?
In front of how many hundred of people?
In front of a few hundred people. Just our closest friends.
It's our closest friends.
In a spotlight with cameras on.
I think it's great to be able to talk about some of those things, because people don't talk about those things. They're even afraid to talk about it with their spouse. But often I have women, that are struggling with being able to have an orgasm, and they don't know what to do, and their husbands don't know what to do, and they're struggling, and they feel like they're deficient. The husbands feel like they can't, adequately pleasure their wives. And so providing some alternatives that are completely honoring and, and helpful.
Yeah. What's the difference between, all right, we're gonna get an aid or assistance with this, and it's good, it's healthy, it's natural, and versus unknowingly he's seen something or she's seen something through pornography, we're going to introduce that into, because those are radically different perspectives. One in which we're going to approve of and say, yes, this is necessary. The other one in which we're like, that is a dangerous road to go down.
Yeah,
how do we draw the line?
That's the line for me where I'm concerned when things are wanting to be introduced because of pornography. I think the difference is for the spouse that is being maybe pressured to have that happening in their sexual intimacy, there's usually some sort of discomfort. It feels a little bit degrading. And so, kind of just being sensitive to what you're feeling about that and being able to talk about that. I get a lot of questions about that. But I believe bringing things in that are introduced during pornography or in your mind, that doesn't belong in intimacy. It doesn't belong in the bedroom at all. It's one of those things that God talks about, keeping the marriage bed pure and honoring each other.
One of the questions that we didn't have time to get to last night is, what advice would you give a spouse who has discovered that their spouse intentionally picks fights because it turns him on?
Oh, didn't see that one.
Well, I like Adrienne's response to that.
Okay, let's dive in.
So it's almost like an addiction to makeup sex.
Right.
And so...
is it like spicier then?
I think so. I don't know.
I don't know. Babe.
We never...
I didn't put that in there.
We never fight, so...
No, but if we fight, then it's like... And then just total separation.
Right, that's usually what happens. But I wonder if it kind of builds up some sort of excitement that then sex becomes a release for that. But there's some problems with that. A little bit of dysfunction there going on.
It's a bit toxic.
I get the idea of, we have felt disconnected. Whenever you reconnect, that it feels great. It's a great reconnection. I've never, we haven't makeup sex is not a thing for us.
Right.
Like, I don't, it's just kind of but I hear couples talk
Right.
about it all the time. And so it is interesting here that there's almost, one of them, I assume the man here can't have that same experience apart from what's going on hormonally in that moment. Is it raising?
I think it's more chemically, the dopamine. So a fight, increases that chemical release, which, let's say someone with ADHD, they actually love to stir up or start fights because it stimulates the chemical in the brain, makes them feel good, and it allows them to focus more. So.
Wow. She just explained some of our coworkers, right?
Exactly. So it's more of that dopamine release, and dopamine is that reward trigger that makes you feel good. So there's something about that it is creating some sort of chemical excitement for him, but it's not healthy. You're right. It's toxic. And it's definitely putting the spouse at a great disadvantage.
Yeah. One question we didn't get to last night, Blaine, I totally forgot about it until just literally right now, but it was such a great question. It's related to this in that the wife texted in that the husband basically can't have meaningful sex unless drunk.
I found that really interesting.
And so it's such an intriguing thing. And to me, as I read that, I think, all right, there's a guy who struggles with vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And some counseling could be very helpful because literally he can't figure a way to let his own guard down.
Right.
So he has to create something that's going to help his inhibitions kind of begin to go away.
Right.
And how sad that is. I hurt for him. I hurt for her in both ways. But just the basic concept of what would it be like if you learned to truly be vulnerable with your wife outside of alcohol?
Yeah, you sent me that question, and I thought, first of all, it was something he finally confided in her, which I thought, okay, that shows he's beginning to recognize that there's something that's wrong and was able to be vulnerable. So I was, okay, kudos to being able to be vulnerable. My second thought is that seems like an oxymoron because if you're drunk, performance
That's what
especially
I
for
was
a guy,
thinking. I was like, isn't it-
becomes more impaired.
Yeah.
Because
I don't drink, so I didn't know that.
Because I've heard this question from multiple people that I've gotten to know and different things. So I see some different layers in it. Number one, lasting longer is actually something that he's is thinking about, so that's why he would want to start drinking. So it enables him to last longer, and it's embarrassing to go so quick and those types of things.
Okay.
The other question on some of it is this idea of it's been so associated with, and I would think pornography would be kind of similar. It's like it's so associated with this event that now it's in a whole new event. My eyes are open to something different. This isn't what I know. I'm scared. I don't know what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the alcohol can, well, from what I've heard, can increase that like arousal piece in the brain. But I think especially for a guy, it can impair performance because it's an inhibitor and a depressant. So things move slower, which, to your point. But my brain goes more to why does he need to be drunk?
Yeah.
So there's a guard up there. Maybe there's something from his past, some abuse from his past, or something that being intimate triggers memories of that alcohol kind of helps him
Numbs.
block that out, numb that out. So yeah, when I read that, I thought, that's great. He's able to start recognizing that, but I would say he needs to dig in and
Now
see.
let's do something about it.
Yeah, what's at the root of that?
Yeah.
But the fact that they're communicating, right, and they're
Yeah.
talking one-on-one, what's in terms of the wife's perspective or the woman's perspective, how can that be well received and encouraged for him to be vulnerable, to say the things that are, right? Because there's an element of like, I don't want to tell you the truth. That's embarrassing. This is intimate. This is our marriage. I'm a loser here. I'm thinking that I'm not doing the things that you want me to do, and I'm embarrassed that I can't do it because I hope, I was better when I was drunk, and I don't want to do that anymore. But what can the female side encourage?
Her question was, how can I turn this around? And I think all she can do is, kind of do what she can't change someone. She can only just start by, she wants to be able to do it sober or not be involved in the alcohol. And I think that's good for her to continue to try to do that. But just being supportive and understanding and, okay, thank you for sharing. Now, is that something that is because it sounds like when you're vulnerable that way, he's concerned about it. He realizes that there's a problem with that, and then encouraging, hey, like, can we go together? Let's figure this out. Why do you think that you need that? Just, some of the questions that open up communication rather than, oh, that's terrible. We can't do that. That shuts people down rather than going, that soft launch and let's try to figure this out together.
Blaine, what were some other questions maybe we didn't get to last night?
I thought there was a couple questions in there, and I had it as well, is like the spiritual side of intimacy, I think is very interesting that gets overlooked a lot of the time. We've had moments where Adrienne was really into some books and really discovering her God-given identity. And I just said, my gosh, I don't know that you've ever been more attractive because the Holy Spirit is filled in you. And there's this spiritual element here where when you're synced up, I don't know if you guys want to talk to someone.
Yeah, well, I do think, we talked about 2 episodes ago, intimacy outside the bedroom. And anytime I talk about the faith element, I put it in this lover category actually within marriage because of that, because there is a level of connection that whenever you reach a spiritual level of connection, that to me is deeper than many other things. And so I think that, that affection, that attraction that is there, you've probably read the stat before about couples that pray together, the divorce rate is far less. I think it's interesting from an intimacy standpoint biblically so in Hebrew culture, Old Testament, they were not explicit with their conversations about sex, about organs, about anything like that. So there was actually a lot of slang talk. The thing that I would not allow in my house when Silas and Ella were little, like we called everything by what it actually was. In the Old Testament, they don't do that. It's all slang talk.
Song of Solomon.
That's exactly
code
right.
Words.
All the code words. But so what is the primary word used in the Old Testament to talk about intimacy the way God created it between a husband and a wife? It's the word to know.
Yeah, yada.
And so whenever it is this idea of he knew his wife, Adam knew Eve, that's a sexual intimacy and knowledge that's going on, but it really symbolizes now it's a full knowledge of who this person is. And so it just begins to show that, I am revealing to Jenny an aspect that nobody else gets to see. She's revealing an aspect to me that nobody else gets to see, so that we know each other in a way that nobody else really knows who we actually are. And then that just brings in the fallenness of who we are, the sinfulness, our need for grace, and yet the redemption, what God is doing in our lives and our story, and then the bigger picture. One thing that we talk about, you've heard me talk about our family values before, that we just go back to this idea that both marriage and family are bigger than us. This isn't just about me loving Jenny. This is about, as I love Jenny well, it has a ripple effect into listeners, into readers, into our kids, into our communities, that God ultimately, I am loving, the way I love Jenny is a testimony of how God is loving me and how I want to worship him. And so to me, the spiritual side of marriage is so vital.
Yeah, because I talk a lot about that the sexual intimacy is very much a spiritual connection. It's very divine and holy, because you mentioned that word to know, which comes from the original Hebrew, the word yada, but it's also used in Daniel talking about how God knows us. So it's like this amazing, parallel to the same kind of intimate connection of, God knowing us, God in us, and in each other. So no wonder it comes under so much attack, right? Because that spiritual connection is, it transcends human connection.
People ask all the time, why is marriage so hard? Why is family so hard? Well, let's go back to our original story. When sin entered the world, it entered in a marriage, and the very first response was to cover ourselves. Shame now enters in. We're now covering the very, organs that we're going to use sexually, and now we're blaming each other. And so why should it be in any surprise now that it's most difficult at times to love our spouses, to love our families, because those are the most intimate relationships that we have. And as sinners, we're afraid, we're scared of being exposed, of being revealed of who we are. And so we always want to point the spotlight to somebody else. So the difficulties that we can have in marriage and family should actually just confirm what is our biblical story? And these are kind of how our first parents responded. What else? Or Adrienne, do you have? Here's what I do. You weren't able to be with us yesterday, but here's what I do whenever I'm doing marriage conferences around the country. Is if we're passing a microphone, everybody has to start their question by saying this: "I have a friend who." So, what are your friends asking about?
Okay.
That would be the Q&A.
I have two.
Okay.
One, I've heard that men's libido drops. It starts going, so it's like always high. And then it starts going down, and women's starts going up. And at some point they meet, like in your 40s or 30s, or I don't know. Is that true, or is that just something I've made up?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I've heard that too. And I don't think that's, I think every situation is going to be different.
Okay.
But men's libido going down in their 40s, no, I haven't seen that.
Adrienne's so disappointed.
Sorry. Well,
Wishful thinking.
and because my friend said, "Man, does it ever?" does
Well,
it ever
that's a
go
fair
down?
question too. Does it
Yeah.
ever go down? Not really.
Say no. So we know the expectations.
So I talked about, erectile dysfunction. And so sometimes you need, as it gets, especially into their 50s and late 50s, there's more of that kind of concern. With women, I think it's more situational. When you're young and you've got all the kids, you just don't have time as much to think about it.
Yeah.
And often then when women go through menopause, they can, even though the libido can go down, their enjoyment of sex can go up.
Because they're just more carefree.
Yes.
They don't have the little kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You don't have to worry about getting pregnant if you don't want to.
Oh,
There's-
yeah. Yeah. True.
So there's
Okay.
some of that going on.
Yeah. And then I have a friend who's. Can we talk about toys?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that off limits?
No. not
Okay. Encouraged. If it's like something you do together and it's not something that you're off doing on your own or whatever. I mean,
Yes.
maybe that's a
We
topic
talked about
too. I don't know.
We talked about
Okay.
that last night.
Okay.
Yeah. So our, specifically, we're talking about things that enhance orgasm for women. Yes. So I totally encourage that if
Yeah.
that's, but together.
Yes.
Obviously together.
Yeah.
When you're doing it on your own, that's, that's
Probably
having sex with yourself,
Yeah.
and that's taking away from the sexual intimacy in a marriage. But together, absolutely. If that, whatever is going to enhance your, the pleasure, but also the connection.
Yeah.
As long as it's, okay with both people and it's honoring. The other, when you talk about other toys, the things that I hear in my office that come from more pornography, it's like, no, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it more disrespectful, more demeaning? Is that
Yes, I mean, just some of the things I don't even think I want to talk about it
Yeah.
here because
Yeah.
it's don't want to plant images in people's mind.
Yeah.
But just things that you see on pornography that
Yeah.
you can buy
Yeah.
that are very degrading and humiliating, and women just are so repulsed by that and feel so degraded by that.
Yeah.
And I think to go back to previous episodes where we had Dr. Jay Stringer on, and he talked about so much of pornography, it's not about lust, it's about power. And so sometimes that could be a sign of what's going on in the relationship. Is this really about mutual pleasure, or is this about one wanting to experience power?
Right.
That would be a warning flag.
Exactly.
to some
Yeah.
extent.
What can I ask one more question in terms of the usage of it? One of the fears that guy friends would have is like, well, then I'm not needed. I'm not able to, like, if that's the thing, helping her, then what about me? So how would you coach that or encourage that if she's struggling to have it, but yet there's some, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. However, if you're doing it together, then it's a mutual, experience. So the husband can be, using that, device to help their wife, and you're, connecting together that way, both,
Yeah. Okay.
creating that, mutual stimulation for each other. And again, that can change as you get older. Because there were some things I talked about that can hinder that. But if you're on certain medications, it can be harder to have an orgasm, especially for women, because it's a little bit more complicated. And so, sometimes those kind of things can really be helpful, so that you don't like just give up on sex altogether and say,
Right.
What do couples do where, 'cause, I mean, the day in which we live, so many people, rightly so, needed drugs for depression that can then, as a side effect, can hurt libido performance or things like that. How's the couple balance that, and what's your encouragement in those scenarios?
well, and the thing with antidepressants that say it decreases libido, but not necessarily performance. Like it might take a little bit longer, or you might have to use some device, especially for a woman if she's on an antidepressant. You have to work a little harder to have an orgasm, but it's still possible. If they're on really high doses, that can make it more difficult. But again, that's where some of those alternative options can be really helpful.
Yeah. How do couples? This was texted in several different forms yesterday. This idea of attraction as we age, and it was brought up. And the way I'm reading the question is primarily the wife talking about the husband not exercising, not working out, just kind of letting himself go. Ella texted me yesterday a little meme that said it's been scientifically proven that happily married men are 15% overweight. And she texted that to me. So my daughter with Down syndrome texted that to me and then said, "I'm sure this isn't you." And I'm like,
She's so funny.
Is.
was mom part of this conversation? So how does a couple
She's
navigate?
concerned about you.
No, that's exactly right. She's watching out for me. How does a couple navigate the aging process, a possible loss of attraction? Is that natural? Is that a warning sign? I mean, I don't know. I mean, here we are. We're married 25 years now. I'm as much, if not more, attracted to Jenny today than I was then. But for other people, that's a struggle. What does that look like?
And I mentioned that one of the things that can inhibit that is when you don't take care of yourself. Taking care of your looks, taking care of your health, taking care of your body. So, and people stop doing that sometimes. And that can be dangerous because their spouse can say, well, I'm not as attracted to them. I'm not as attracted. I have to be careful with that because then there's a body, that body image problems where women that are already, very small have concern about that. So I'm careful on how I approach that. But, if you don't care about taking care of yourself anymore or how you look, that to me is what's going on. You've lost some sort of passion. You've lost interest in each other. And it's you're honoring your spouse by taking care of yourself, not only your physical appearance, but your health.
I think too, for women, it's like, we want to know that our husbands can take care of us and our family and protect us. And it's like, are you capable? Like, are you strong? Can you do that? Like, if you're not working out or taking care of yourself, like, we want to feel secure in that too. And attraction, of course. But I think it's also this like mental, if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you take care of us?
Right.
They have found a direct correlation, Adrienne, to the amount of rounds a guy plays of golf and his longevity.
Thank you.
It's 100% accurate. That is scientifically
Highly
proven.
doubt that. I have
No.
Who brought the expert?
research.
What about let's take that same topic but in an opposite form, and what about the woman who doesn't think she's attractive, and the husband is like, "Oh my goodness, you're as attractive as can be. Turn the lights on."
Right.
But I hear this a great deal of we can only have sex with the lights off, and the husband who is more visually driven is like, well, "Come on, you're beautiful." Isn't this what every woman wants, is to be desired by their husband, and the wife just can't see it? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, and that's kind of culturally driven with, that this idea of how a woman should, look. And so that's where it's $1 billion industry to try to make us look younger and slimmer. I see a lot of people in my office with that, kind of just that whole body image. I think it has a deeper root and needs some help to kind of dissect and.
Let's dissect.
It's hard for women though, after you have babies, like your body changes so much. And even just from like 5 years to the next 5 years, like you're not nursing anymore. So now your breasts are down to your belly button, you know, like it's, and it is hard when you're on social media and you're like, these girls have glass skin and perky, you know, it's just, it's really hard.
It is really hard.
It's something I struggle with. I know in our marriage, it's like,
Well, literally this morning, I was like, gosh, you are so beautiful. Yeah. But no, I'm not. Like,
or I mean, you just always see the imperfections, you know, and
do.
I love it. He is so encouraging and I want to be wanted, of course, but sometimes it's annoying. I'm like, okay, like get your hands off. It's almost like, but it is a blessing. And I know that even though it can feel annoying, but a lot of women would desire that. I know.
Right. But and I think you make a good point.
But they can have him.
But the husband constantly reassuring them. Obviously, sometimes, you know, it can be like, you don't need to do it every day. That's a problem. But, you know, but building your wife up and making them feel beautiful and sexy to them and desirable. So I said last night, guys, use your words. Those are some of the words we, you know.
Is it annoying though when I'm constantly like, ugh, like, no, I'm not.
well, yeah, because one of the tensions that we have is, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that to look younger, thinner, beautiful, da-da-da-da. Who are you doing that for? Because I'm looking at you and saying, gosh, you couldn't be more beautiful. So that's where it feels jaded to me, because it's like, who are you trying to impress if it's not me, right?
Myself.
Or girlfriends.
The girlfriends.
Like it isn't. This
it's
isn't
not for other men.
This
Like,
isn't
trust me.
attention.
No.
Yeah,
It's not. It's for
girlfriends.
really not.
I get tired of the one I've got.
Yeah.
But to flip the side, it's like, I used to play hockey. Fitness was always a stress, and it's like a demanding thing. Then once I was done hockey, I was like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to do any of that anymore. It was such a negative experience. So then the other day, I was like, you know, the only reason that I would get fit again would be for you. And then she's like, okay, great.
I was like, do it.
I was like, I don't know.
Do I want it that much?
Right, but it's both and,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Right,
like, here
absolutely.
I'm being why don't you see or hear my words? And she's like, well, why don't you see my desires, right? And she doesn't want me to be some unhealthy form of, you know, addicted to working
Right.
out. And it's just a healthy,
Just healthy balance.
balance,
yeah.
right? It's
I
like-
remember when I was younger, because I had twins first, and so
wow.
was pregnant for a long time, and so I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do, you know, when we do aerobics on the TV.
Yep. Oh, yeah. My mom was an aerobics instructor. So
I get up at 6 o'clock before the kids would get up, or 6:30. My husband would drag out of bed and then lie on the couch and watch me.
yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
come on, you lazy butt, get up.
I know.
And
yeah.
it's so funny now because I just kept doing it. And then now he's out doing me with, doing 20-mile bike rides
wow.
and staying really healthy and fit. And I love it now because we both really care. Now it's not, I mean, we want to look good for each other, but now it's about being healthy for our grandkids
Right.
and
Exactly.
staying around long enough to take care of
Yeah.
each other. And
And it's a great way to spend time together.
oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, we go
that's
to the gym together.
Excellent way, and you're moving, and you're not face to face, and yet you can still communicate, and you're having a shared experience. And I mean, one of the great ways I think a couple can connect. Let's think through a couple of the questions that we went through and answered last night, and just kind of answer them here in ways that were so meaningful. Let's hit with this idea of first. Make sure that we're very clear. The question was somewhat implied last night, if not directly asked. My wife doesn't have the right to tell me no. We're married. I want sex. I get sex. Her body belongs to me. It just it kind of ticked me off, if you want to know the truth.
Step off.
So let's be very clear here, Barbara, that a person retains the agency over their own lives.
Absolutely.
Being married does not mean I've lost my ability to say no.
Right.
Now, there is a responsibility, no question, to nurture together a happy, healthy sexual life. But left to our own devices, we have to honor the agency of the other person.
Absolutely. And I think going back to your, intimacy outside of the bedroom, obviously that's going to, possibly a relationship that has lost any kind of friendship or sense of safety if there's that much pressure, that much control and power over the physical intimacy. And that's just a marriage that's going to break down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I agree, it's spiritual abuse.
Yeah. Okay, well, you're gonna hear that, and what you're about to hear is we're about to go inside the Worship Center, Bayside, Granite Bay, for a little Q&A with Dr. Barbara Wilson and myself. Blaine was leading the questions. Tons of questions were texted. If you want to text a question in that we're going to look at a later episode, you can text marriage to 56316. That's marriage to 56316. Maybe we'll answer your question in an upcoming episode. But here is the Q&A of becoming friends, partners, and lovers. And so this person texted in and says, how long should I wait after my wife has appendicitis? I
think that's up to your wife, actually.
I think they really want to know the answer. We're kidding. We're kidding.
Are we, though?
Does your wife feel?
Okay, Blaine.
All right, here we go. In marriage, is there a difference between disrespect and jealousy? Is there a good way to explain to a spouse, especially with some of these opposite sex coworkers? I guess there's some tension in there. Jealousy, disrespect, coworkers.
Yeah, I think, my first thought on jealousy is we have to look at, is there something with my spouse? Are there actions that they have taken that now create a doubt within me? If so, those have to be confronted. Mm-hmm. Or there also has to be the question of they've done nothing, but from my past wounds, now I'm insecure in what's going on. And so to diagnose the difference there, I think is extremely important. And then I do think jealousy is a different aspect than respect, but I think they're all intermingled in such a way that it's such a serious topic. We have to get to the root of what is actually going on. And then whenever we're talking about coworkers, what are the agreed to boundaries that we have? One thing we talk about all the time is you have to have a shared language. And so whenever I talk about being faithful and Jenny talks about being faithful, we need to define what that means to make sure that we're both on the same page of what faithfulness means. And so if for me, it means I'm never gonna be in a lengthy texting conversation with a person of the opposite sex unless my wife knows about it. Mm-hmm. But Jenny has a different definition. I literally could be unfaithful to her definition and maybe we haven't discussed it in a proper way. So I think with the coworkers, it's a boundary question that needs to be discussed. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it can be based on the history of their relationship. Have there been other things that have happened that create that distrust? And sometimes with jealousy, it can be control, or it can just be that anxious attachment where they're worried of any little thing that happens that makes them feel like there's a threat to their relationship.
Mm-hmm. That's good. If my partner is asking for another chance after betraying trust, but truly wants to be better, however, their actions in the beginning remind me of my ex, and I'm afraid to trust again, what do I do?
Yeah, Barbara.
Well, hold on, wait a minute. So if the ex was unfaithful, not the current.
So it's the current one has had betraying trust, but there's also a relationship previous to that where an ex would have reminded them of this action as well. Do we go for it again, or what do we do?
Okay, are you following?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I have thoughts.
Okay, go.
But I like your opinions better. So here's my thought. First of all, so you have a relationship where trust has been broken against a person that has this history in their past. That's always a serious issue. This is now even more complicated because of the wounds that's going to be me as an individual. I would have questions. So I'm speaking solely to the person who has been betrayed, not only in the past, but then also in the present. A couple of questions I would have. Are they married? If the answer is no, this is my opinion. This is not gospel. This is my opinion. If you're dating somebody that's unfaithful, they have lost their chance to be in a relationship with you, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree.
It's done. It doesn't mean that they're bad. Doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean anything. It means you lost that chance. I feel very sorry for you. I'm going to move on to the next situation. Now, if they are married, then there are some different responsibilities here. And so I would say if this is a person that is married, Trust has been broken. If an affair has taken place, you recognize you get a choice here. You get a choice. If you want to leave, you can leave. If you want to give it another chance, I think you're welcome to. Professional help, I think, is extremely important. And then also a recognition of, I'm not expecting all-out perfection in every area, but there are certain boundaries I have that I will not go back to. All communication has to be cut off with that person. If it's not, I'm done. There has to be clear growth that is taking place. Again, not imperfection. As a matter of fact, part of that growth is how you handle imperfection. How, whenever you make a mistake, do you confess it? Do you own it? Do you make progress? That kind of thing. If that person is making progress, then okay, I'll continue to walk the route, recognizing, because here's what I would think. Let's say right now you don't know if this relationship is over or not. You don't have to make that decision right now. You can wait and see, is this person going to show that they're going to work on the situation or not? And I can walk with them. And if I get further down the road and it's just, I just can't do it, or they're not making the progress I think they need, then at that moment that I'm out. So I'd say if they're dating, it's over. If they're married, you have some choices, but they have to show some growth. And here's what's difficult. If they cannot do so, if they are not willing to do so, then unfortunately, as long as they're cheating on you, they're not going to be truly married to you. And so I think you're going to have to go your separate ways under the biblical ability. What's your thought?
I couldn't have said it better.
Oh, there we go. Wow. Thank you.
Kevin?
I think on certain answers, it should
Dr.
be stamped with the barber's approval. And then other times, I should answer things and you should be going, oh, I don't think so. Go ahead, Blaine.
Okay. How do we set intimacy goals that don't come across as condemning ideas or standards or you feeling judged?
Yeah. So how can we improve intimacy without it becoming a scorecard?
Right. Well, that's the intimacy that you talked about, that emotional intimacy where it's not a, contract or I did this, so you should do this, right? So it's how safe do you feel? Are you able to communicate that? Because that does not create, intimacy.
Let's talk a little bit about the orgasm gap for a moment. That's become a hot topic, right?
Let's.
No? Is that are y'all not thinking about all that? No, it's Sheila Gregoire, right? Another Canadian. I'm surrounded by Canadians.
Oh, you guys are welcome.
Canadians.
She did a research and a study to see that there is a 47% gap in orgasm frequency in intimacy between men and women, between husbands and wives, 47% of the gap, which she relates to a great deal of all the tension that comes over frequency. What she has found is basically if the woman enjoys sex, many of the frequency discussions become minimized. They're not as serious. So for the average couple out here, is it the expectation of both should orgasm every time? Is it the expectation of generally over a week? We have something on our marriage assessment of in the average month, is it about the same amount of time for men and women, yes or no? And so what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I don't think that there needs to be both orgasming every time, because it's still, an emotional and physical connection, even if, let's say, just one of you is orgasming or, you're doing that to help that one person, but it's still, a gift of love and a connection with each other.
But would you say in the average month that there needs to be some similarity? Because I think my fear is sex, when it goes wrong, oftentimes becomes solely about the man's experience. Mm-hmm. How do we balance that without it turning into what's the score this month? Okay, well, we got to work on that. I mean, you don't want that scoreboard mentality. Right.
Well, and I think for women, also the pressure to have an orgasm every time, if that's something that they're, struggling with, that also can inhibit, their ability to just calm down enough to be able to mentally get into that space. And again, sometimes that just takes time, like learning each other's bodies and learning what helps and what can help, especially the woman, get into that place where she can relax enough, because their mind, your mind is so full. And so a woman really does need to concentrate a little bit more on what's happening. And it's just not quite the same as the man's experience. In my experience, I do work with women who have trouble, with orgasm. And so sometimes having some things that can help with that, can be helpful, where they're not always having to make sure that your husband is creating that orgasm, but you can.
So, I mean, what would be some things?
Well, like some things that can help. I don't know. We're Bayside.
These are questions I can ask when Ray's not here, right? Seriously, it's a Wednesday night. We can talk like adults. Like what would be?
Like vibrators for a woman to help, because it's just such a delicate area of the body that doesn't always respond exactly the way you want it to, or to certain touches. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes women, you need to be able to educate your husband to be able to stimulate that, or you might be able to kind of help each other do that. It doesn't have to just be all one way, right? There's so much. There's a great deal of freedom in that intimacy. Again, as long as you're not doing something that is uncomfortable or dishonoring to the other person, but helping each other be able to experience that pleasure and doing whatever is helpful I think that's honoring, and it's part of the fun. And honestly, the longer you're married, you learn more and more how to do that in a comfortable way and an honoring way. So, don't be afraid to try some different things.
Yeah, and we have some great resources. I can send it out in the email.
But we sell
carefully.
vibrators?
No. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness.
Kevin's side hustle.
That was not
let's
where
move
I was
on
going
to the
with that.
next question.
I'm really glad Ray's not here. Say sex on Sunday morning.
No, I wasn't even allowed to say sex on Sunday morning. But we can send you through some good books and resources, Christian resources that talk about these issues to assist you in that. So you're not just searching. Don't Google it. Is what I'm trying to. Is basically what I'm trying to say. There were several questions that were texted in very early on specifically, and not all the questions were this way, but here was a common theme multiple people had asked, and it was this. Marriage in their 70s or 80s, husband not able to perform now. Mm-hmm. Now there feels like a total lack of intimacy, and she's asking, what do we do? Does it have to be this way? Mm-hmm. How would you answer that?
Well, again, it doesn't always have to be intercourse. Again, there's other ways to enjoy each other and to have pleasure and to have an orgasm. So again, being willing to try new things. And like you said, sometimes reading some books that can be helpful, that kind of broaden especially good Christian books on sex, that can broaden, maybe giving you some ideas that you might not have even thought that might be helpful, that you can explore together and talk about together.
Yeah. Blaine?
I think I give some really good resources. I think I gave some in the handout.
Yeah, you did.
One of them is, there's one that by the Penners, they rate some great stuff. Was it the Christian Guy's Guide to Great Sex?
Yeah, I think it's on the back of the handout. I think there's several books that are there.
And those are like some specific, help on, how to explore. If you're struggling, being able to have orgasm or to being able to have that connection. I think sometimes, and it's also, I think we think that we have to all both orgasm at the same time. That's just, okay, that's heaven maybe, but I don't know, like it's not going to happen every time. So don't put a lot of pressure on each other. You're going to find your way and just enjoy. Don't put a lot of stress on each other.
Gottman says that 25% of attempts at intimacy fail in some way. And so it's the idea it's planned and I ate too much or the kid came in or whatever. And so to begin to understand that it's not going to work every time, and that's okay. And that's an aspect of what goes on. Yeah. Blaine?
Okay, this one is in lines of like kind of two ships passing at the night. So both are on different schedules. What are some trips and tips.
Careful.
Hello.
Careful.
And
what happened to that Canadian? Why doesn't he work here anymore? Well,
I'm getting all nervous over here.
I'm seeing a Q&A.
I can't understand your accent.
Anyway, they're on different schedules. What do you guys got from?
Yeah. Different schedules, like somebody works through the night, somebody works through the day.
Exactly.
So that's where you might need a quickie somewhere in there, or plan an opportunity.
Let's make a list of things that we're not supposed to say. And I love it. Can we check off the list?
Oh,
Yeah.
I know.
I think that idea of what you were talking
turning red
about,
up here? No, just,
what you were talking about, and we talk about it in the guidebook as well, of the scheduled element of this. Of some people, so I talk about in Friends, Partners, Lovers, that you need spontaneous sex, scheduled sex, and maintenance sex. And so spontaneous is, you understand, you're right, like you go out, you have a great time, you feel close, you get home, like this feels good, right? Maintenance really is, one has a higher drive than the other. Okay, let's do this for you. But scheduled sex, a lot of people look at and go, oh my goodness, that sounds so boring and so horrible. And I'm like, all right, then we're not going to schedule Christmas from now on. And yet Christmas is one of the best seasons because it is this sense of anticipation. And so there's nothing wrong with this concept of what do our schedules look like and how can we schedule this time? Because what it shows is we're prioritizing each other.
Yeah.
And one thing Gottman says, he says if you take adultery, addiction, and abuse out of the picture, that for the average couple where that trauma is kind of out of the picture, sex comes down to a very simple thing. Friends who prioritize it. That's it. I would say friends and partners who prioritize it is all it comes down to. And because if you have the friendship and the partnership, and now let's make this an important part of our relationship, then you'll figure it out. Because here's the thing. This is a horrible example. If you were having an affair, you have different schedules and you figure it out. And so if you want it, you'll make it happen. And so I think it's now for the couple to prioritize this in a way to begin to, and literally the quickie, the planning, all of that can add to the excitement, I think, of what's going on.
Okay, we'll turn the corner here a little bit. My spouse discourages any reference to my late spouse because they view it as having another person potentially in the relationship. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, wow.
yeah, it's kind of, feels like comparison maybe.
Yeah, so difficult. Thankfully we don't have experience in this area yet at this moment, but I can only imagine if something were to happen to Jenny and I do get remarried, it doesn't in any way change my love for Jenny.
Right.
And so the idea that, I don't know, I can't fathom the idea that I don't have the space to mention her or to still have that aspect of my life. And yet I get the difficulty of that. But how would you, if you were counseling with a couple and so he's not allowed to bring her up or she's not allowed to bring him up?
Well, if I was counseling, I would want to know why, what's happening. Why does that create discomfort for that person? Is it too much? Are they talking about them too much? Is there comparison going on? And so that would be my first, kind of question, and kind of getting to the root of why this is so painful. I've had situations where with couples that are married, but there's the ex-boyfriend or also an ex-husband. They're not passed away, but they're still living, where there's a lot of difficulty seeing them or talking about them, which I can understand. So trying to eliminate, pictures in the house that create those kind of memories. But and then also, why is the other person talking a lot about their late spouse? Once in a while is obviously appropriate, but is there too much of that, and why is that?
Yeah. Blaine, one question I see here is there's a question about the phrase work husband and work wife. No judgment here, and I get the joking around of it. That is a phrase Jenny and I would never, ever use. the implication of it. I'm just uncomfortable with that type of implication to say, oh yeah, she's my work wife, and yeah, she work husband. It's just such a, especially in this world where those roles are already intermingled. I mean, the most likely person you are to have an affair with is your coworker. That's just not language I'm willing to take part in. I get I'm not judging anybody that uses that. I get the jokes of it. But I just think that's a dangerous road to go down with somebody of the opposite sex of that. I mean, I might call Blaine my work wife. That would be because you take care of things.
Yeah, you're right.
Get it done.
You're right.
I like that.
Appreciate
But no, that's just language I would be very hesitant to use. Blaine?
Okay. My spouse wants to do sexual things in our marriage that I do not feel comfortable doing. He uses 1 Corinthians 7:4, for the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does.
Okay.
No, it's...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so...
That's...
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we're going to let this settle for a minute.
So here's the thing. So if I'm saying, hey, I want to do this, and she says no, and I say, well, I have authority over you, then okay, then she says, well, the Bible says I have authority over you, so you really don't want it. Like, it doesn't work that way. That is not the meaning of that passage. And here's, let's be honest. That is spiritual abuse.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That is spiritual abuse that we cannot go down. Here's the thing. If my spouse is uncomfortable with a sexual act, we are not engaging in that sexual act. Mm-hmm. There's reasons for that. Now we might get with Barbara and begin to talk about what are the reasons behind that, and is there past trauma, and can we work through that? All those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But safety is such an integral part of the sexual relationship. And if a person does not feel safe, they cannot engage in a healthy way. And so I think that's a very dangerous road to go down. And I think not only is it spiritual abuse, let me be clear from a theological standpoint, it is all out heresy. That is as poor of biblical interpretation as I can possibly imagine. And so it's wrong in every way.
Absolutely. Yep.
What would you say about that idea of he wants something she doesn't? How do you negotiate that? And because, I mean, let's face it. I mean, you do this as well. I've had questions of she's uncomfortable with oral, and add that to the list. And
you didn't say sex.
I've got one more.
and yet he's like, but isn't this normal? And so how would a couple work through something like that?
Again, yeah, just conversation. As long as it's, so when I work with couples, as Christian couples, it's like, okay, what does the Bible actually prohibit? Certain things, right? Pornography is one, bringing other people into your relationship, and there's a variety of other things. So as long as it's not like something that is completely prohibited, the reason I am concerned about it is because I feel like with pornography, then people want to bring that into their sexual relationship and kind of act that out because that's what kind of they've trained their brain to enjoy. And that's where I get concerned. Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Is there a source or a root of that is really, kind of dishonoring? You're already bringing something else into the relationship, and now you're, projecting that onto your spouse. That is really dishonoring. But if it's not in that category, then Paul says in 1 Corinthians, everything is beneficial as long as, or everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. So then you just talk about it. Why does this not feel comfortable? And it's just conversation again, which is what we have a difficult time having. But yeah, some things are perfectly fine, just uncomfortable for someone, and that would be interesting to find out why.
And so go back in the guidebook and look at the chapter on sex, and there's a section in there about how do we talk about it, because I would say for many couples that is the biggest issue. Many of us grew up in spaces and places where it just wasn't natural to talk about it. So how do you begin those conversations? I think becomes a powerful thing. Let's do one more, Blaine.
One more. Okay. I got so many good ones though.
Yeah,
so you guys are gonna have to listen to the podcast.
We got a podcast tomorrow.
Okay, good. Men need to be vulnerable with their women, but is there a point where a man can be too vulnerable?
Men can be vulnerable with women, but
Men should be vulnerable, but is there a point where men become too vulnerable?
Yeah, I think there can be, from the standpoint of if there's also not on the other side a sense of strength. And so there are spaces in which I am offering strength to Jenny, and she can be vulnerable and has space to be vulnerable. And then she offers strength to me, and I have a space to be vulnerable. I think where a man can be too vulnerable is if all he ever is vulnerable and never has this sense of creating a space for his spouse because let's face it, in some places, only one of you can be weak at a time in some circumstances. And so I think if she is always in the position of having to be the rock, the strong one, the protective one, all those things, then I don't think he's fulfilling his role from a masculine standpoint. But for most men, it is this concept of we're not vulnerable enough. But we get to cover a lot of this tomorrow. We're going to have a great time. Barbara, thank you so much for your time, for who you are. Absolutely. Hey, let me close with this. We got 3 minutes before you have to get your kids, so give me 3 minutes if you don't mind. I'll send out an email, probably not tomorrow, because I'm going to go cheer on my Razorbacks in San Francisco tomorrow, but be praying. So I'll send out an email in the next couple of days. I want you to take what's your next step? Think about the Good Life Marriage Community. Think about Rooted. Think about Prime Time. Think about Married with Kids. Think about Young Married. If you're dating or engaged, our premarital class will happen this summer. What is your next step to continue this process? I think for many in this room, a great next step would be you've kind of created a community around the table. Why don't you all get together, regularly meet on Wednesday nights? You can go through the guidebook now. There's videos that we have. Go through session by session. Barbara's books are available out in the bookstore. Our bookstore isn't open tonight, but this weekend you can buy Barbara's books.
It is?
And yes, absolutely. It's right out there. You can buy Barbara's books this weekend, and that will be a great opportunity to go from there. And also, as I send you this email, I'll send a survey. If you could respond to that survey, it's extremely beneficial as we try to plan what our next Big Wednesday is, and in every way that we can build up marriages, not only here at Bayside Granite Bay, but across the Sacramento region. What an honor it is to be one of your pastors. Thank you for your faithfulness over these 6 weeks. It's a time period that I'm very grateful for you and for you paying attention and everything that we're doing here to invest in marriages. And if we can do anything for you, respond to that email. We'll process that information as best we can and pastor you to the best of our ability. Good night and God bless.
Good night.